constrained by a federal system. I mean, the federal system has but the match, and you should correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but isn't the match here different than in other states? Is the split between the county and the state service matches different?
Oh, absolutely. We're very unique in this situation nationwide in that there actually is a local share to Medicaid. In most states, it's fully just a federal and a state function. So historically, New York has had a local component that dates all the way back to the beginning of the program. We agree with Steve that this is something that really needs to get looked at, and we have to decide, I think, over the next few years, who should be providing what services and who should be paying for it.
Well, what does that require? A constitutional change or a legislative change?
I think for that it requires just legislative changes, but I think they're very complicated changes because the state would be, for example, in the health care case, you would be taking a large burden off of the locals, but you'd be placing it at state taxpayers'
Right, you're
level.
shifting money around, essentially.
Exactly.
But didn't Governor Pataki, the last time that we were talking about Medicaid reform, push to take over a certain portion of the local? So what happened to that?
Governor Pataki, in his last year of his administration, passed a cap. Essentially, let's freeze the local expenditures at a certain point in time and let them grow 3% each year. That's growing $200 million every year to the local property taxpayer. When I looked at the Medicaid budget today, $51.5 billion, and I saw how it was broken up: mental health, home care, nursing homes, hospitals and clinics. I had to ask myself, how could counties ever be involved in such a system?
Okay, but what would happen if you just stopped? Hold on, we'll get just one sec. Hold that 1 second. If you just stopped providing the services the way that the state, with all due respect, has stopped sending you, or not stopped, is delayed in sending you the money. What if you said, okay, until we get money X, we're not going to provide service Y because we need money to provide services. Otherwise, we're dunning our taxpayers and taking money away from county services that we also need to provide.
What county leaders communicate to me and to the legislature and to the executive branch of government is they want their local identity. They want to be able to provide services locally. We are losing our ability to provide local services, quality of life programs for our seniors, veterans, nursing homes, infrastructure repair, other places that we can make a difference locally. Why? We're delivering state services locally. But what I would like to say to this state and to Mr. Megna is we want to be providers in the system of government. We think that we are properly situated to provide state services, not to finance them, but to provide those services.
Bob?
Well, one point I'd like to get back to that Steve raised is we'd love it if our Medicaid budget was only going up by $200 million a year. While Steve is right, the county budget is capped at 3% increases for Medicaid. We've been experiencing 7, 8, and 10% increases, plus picking up the local share that's capped.
Right.
So our Medicaid expenses have been growing by 12 and 13% a year. So we actually think the cap is working and doing a good job. We need to go further. I think we acknowledge that. On some of the other issues Steve raises, I think who provides the service is vital. The state acts largely as a conduit now anyway. We do provide some services ourselves, but we ship money to not-for-profits, to other providers, to healthcare providers, and to counties to provide services directly to folks who are on the ground. So we think that's the right model. Who pays for it, as Steve has raised, is the big issue. Should it be state taxpayers? And if so, how do you pay for it? No one wants to raise taxes at one particular level of government, so it's fine to say I'll be the service provider, but I don't want to finance it, and say to the state, well, you finance it, but I'll provide the service.
Well, what about the idea that if you're going to hold back money, that when you give it to them, and as Steve would say, well, we don't want to be your bank, state. If you're going to hold our money, we would like you to give us something in return, interest, for example. Is that a possibility? I would expect that not, when you say there's a $7.5 billion deficit.
Well, no, I think it is fair that Steve raises the issue of delayed payments. And again, I think if we had a budget, we would be doing our best, and we will, even in the situation we're in now, to catch up with payments that we owe the counties for services they've already provided. So I would think over the summer months, most of the money that we owe the counties will get reimbursed. However, we need that revenue bill to get passed. It's hard to make commitments when you only have a part of the budget done, so we need the revenue bill to get passed. And I think once that's done, I think we'll get even with the counties pretty quickly.
You satisfied with that?
Well, the state, Bob has always been a very straightforward individual who represents the state very well and serves the governor with distinction, without question. But the counties are still waiting for payment. This late budget has only made the delayed payments that much worse by an additional 3-4 months beyond the delays. But there's one other thing that I think that's coming down here, and that's the Obama administration and the Congress passed national health insurance reform. This is a prime example of where the role of county governments in this system.
Well, actually, we're going to have to revisit this issue because unfortunately we are out of time, but we also will be holding you to your timetable, and we'll be checking to see if, in fact, he does get that timetable. Thank you very much, Bob
Sure.
Megna. I appreciate it, and Steve Acquario, thanks very much.
Sure.